She moved into the neighborhood with nothing but hope. It was a quiet street, lined with green lawns and white picket fences, the kind of place that promised peace. But that peace was shattered the moment Karen appeared at her door. Clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched on her nose, and a smirk that never seemed to fade. "Your grass is too high," Karen declared, her voice sharp with an authority she seemed to grant herself. "That's a violation. You will be fined." Thinking it had to be a joke, she offered a soft, uncertain laugh. But the joke turned sour when the fine arrived in the mail, $100 stamped in aggressive red ink. Just 2 days later, another fine was taped to her door. This time, for leaving a recycling bin in sight for a mere 5 minutes after the truck had passed. Neighbors would whisper behind their fences, their eyes darting around nervously. "Don't fight her," they'd say, their voices hushed. "She's the HOA president. She controls everything." But she wasn't the type to bow down to a petty tyrant. She was made to stand up, to fight back. And so, the battle began. Karen escalated, her tactics growing more sinister. She started taking pictures late at night, stuffing envelopes with blurry, invasive photos shoved against the front door. Then, one morning, she woke to a horrifying sight. Her brand new fence was covered in paint. The word "violator" was scrawled in dripping red across the pristine white boards. She immediately checked her security cameras, her heart pounding. And there it was, the image that made her blood run cold. It was Karen herself, spray can in hand, a chilling smile on her face as she vandalized the property. At the next HOA meeting, Karen denied it all with her arms folded defensively. "These are baseless accusations," she said, her voice dripping with arrogance. But her denial only stirred the pot. Murmurs rippled through the room as neighbors began sharing their own secrets, their own stories of Karen's reign of terror. One family was fined for hanging Christmas lights a week too early, another for planting tulips instead of the HOA-approved roses. A man recounted, his voice breaking, how he lost his beloved dog after Karen made a false report to animal control. Another family had been forced to leave the neighborhood entirely, driven out by constant threats of foreclosure over minor infractions. This wasn't just about high grass anymore. This was a pattern of abuse. So she began her counteroffensive. She collected every letter, every photo, every threat. She stacked the evidence, organizing it meticulously until it filled a thick, heavy binder. Karen noticed, of course, and just laughed, mocking her openly in the street. "Evidence means nothing here," she sneered. "I am the law in this neighborhood." Weeks later, a new letter arrived, more dangerous than any before. It demanded the removal of her fence, her garden shed, and even the flower bed she'd so lovingly planted. She refused to comply. In response, Karen sent another threat. A lien would be placed on her property unless she paid thousands of dollars in accumulated, fabricated fines. Her mailbox began to overflow with warnings, final notices, and legally worded threats designed to intimidate and crush her spirit. But she stayed calm. She picked up the phone and called her lawyer. The lawyer read through the documents, his disbelief quickly turning to professional outrage. "This isn't enforcement," he said, looking up from the stack of papers. "This is extortion. It's harassment and abuse of power." Together, they dug into the HOA's records. And what they uncovered was a complex web of deceit, fake landscaping bills, non-existent maintenance fees, and payments to shell companies that led directly back to one person. Karen had been funneling the community's funds directly into her own private accounts. Vacations, luxury cars, expensive jewelry, all paid for with money stolen from her neighbors. The evidence was overwhelming, an undeniable trail of fraud. Yet, Karen continued to strut through the neighborhood like a queen, completely oblivious to the storm gathering on her horizon. Knowing she couldn't do it alone, she called a secret meeting in her garage. At first, only a few brave neighbors dared to show up, their faces etched with fear. But then, more came. They arrived in twos and threes, whispering their stories of loss, fear, and frustration. Soon, dozens of people filled the small space, each one carrying the weight of Karen's tyranny. That night, they agreed. They would unite. They would take her to court and remove her from power forever. Karen wasn't stupid. She sensed the shift in the air, the newfound defiance in her neighbor's eyes, and it made her furious. She doubled her attacks, striking harder than ever before. Police cars started appearing at the house late at night, responding to false noise complaints. Anonymous, baseless reports flooded the system. City inspectors summoned by Karen arrived unannounced, flashing floodlights through the windows, searching for any possible violation. They found nothing, and left, visibly annoyed at the wasted time. But Karen was far from finished. She wanted total, crushing control. That's when the hero made her move. She leaked the financial records to the local press. Within hours, headlines exploded across the city. HOA president accused of fraud. Community funds misused for personal luxury. Karen stormed into the next HOA meeting, her body shaking with pure rage. "You think you've won?" she shouted, her voice echoing in the tense silence. "You know nothing about me!" Standing firm, the hero met her gaze, her own voice calm and steady. "We know enough, and tomorrow the court will too." The day of the court hearing arrived. The room was packed, a sea of familiar faces from the neighborhood, all there to bear witness. Karen walked in flanked by an expensive lawyer, dressed in pearls and an outfit that screamed entitlement. Her lawyer painted a picture of a dedicated public servant, a loyal guardian of community standards. But the evidence stacked higher than his hollow words could ever defend. There were the emails, the forged signatures, the bank statements tracing stolen money. There were the chilling photos of Karen, caught in the act of vandalizing property under the pale moonlight. And then, one by one, the neighbors testified. With trembling voices, they told their stories. Stories of fear, unjust fines, and relentless threats that all wove together into a perfect, terrifying tapestry of abuse. The judge listened, his expression growing darker with every testimony. When Karen's lawyer again called her a dedicated leader, the judge slammed his hand on the bench. "Enough," he declared, his voice booming through the courtroom. "This is not leadership. This is a crime. Fraud, harassment, embezzlement, and a gross abuse of power." The color drained from Karen's face as the official charges were read aloud. Her lawyer stammered, but he was drowned out by the rising murmur of outrage. The ruling was swift and final. Immediate removal from the HOA board, full financial restitution to the community, and prison time.
Cheers erupted in the hallway. Neighbors embraced, tears of relief streaming down their faces. For the first time in years, the community was truly free. She returned home to a street reborn. Children were playing freely on the lawns, their laughter filling the air. The HOA was dissolved and replaced by a voluntary community council built on trust and respect, not fear. Karen's house was seized and sold at auction. A new family moved in, planting bright, colorful roses where poison and negativity once grew.
As the sun dipped low, she sat on her porch, breathing in the peaceful evening air. She smiled. This fight was never just for her. It was for every neighbor who had been silenced. They had stood together, and together, they had torn down a tyrant. Karen thought she could control them forever, but silence, once broken, can become a roar. And justice had roared louder than any threat. The street stood proud, and its people, at long last, stood free.